The monsoon-drenched field hospital hummed with the grim symphony of war. 40 Japanese women, prisoners of war, stood before a British medic, their faces etched with fear. One among them lay dying, her life ebbing away. The unspoken order hung heavy in the humid air. Let her die quietly. But what Captain James Whitmore did next defied every expectation, every military doctrine, and would forever alter the course of medical ethics in warfare. Burma, 1945. The air hung thick and heavy, saturated with the relentless monsoon rains that had turned the landscape into a quagmire. Near Rangoon, a British field hospital, little more than a collection of tents and makeshift structures, struggled against the elements and the ceaseless tide of casualties. British forces, stretched impossibly thin after years of brutal jungle warfare against a fanatical enemy, pushed relentlessly forward. Supply lines, already tenuous, were often severed by treacherous terrain and enemy action, leaving the medical teams desperately short of essential supplies. Every bandage, every drop of antiseptic was a precious commodity, and the newly arrived penicillin, a miracle drug, was guarded like gold. Its supply was critically limited, a few precious vials representing the difference between life and death for countless British lads. It was into this crucible of hardship that an impossible humanitarian dilemma arrived. 40 Japanese women, captured during the rapid British advance, were brought to the field hospital. Among them were nurses, comfort women, and civilian auxiliaries, their faces a mixture of defiance and terror. One woman, perhaps no older than 22, lay on a stretcher, delirious with fever, her body racked by an infected shrapnel wound and advanced sepsis. The British command faced an excruciating choice: use the incredibly scarce penicillin on an enemy prisoner when British soldiers were dying daily from treatable infections, or adhere to military pragmatism and conserve resources for their own. Captain James Whitmore, a 34-year-old surgeon from Manchester, serving with the Royal Army Medical Corps since the North African campaigns, found himself at the heart of this moral maelstrom. He was a man of quiet resolve, his hands steady, his mind sharp, but even his seasoned composure was tested. Institutional pressure was immense. Senior officers, their faces grim with the realities of war, made their position clear. "Let her die quietly," they suggested, their voices low but firm. "Don't waste precious resources on the enemy when our own lads need every vial." Military doctrine, a cold, hard truth in wartime, supported this stance. Enemy combatants were to receive basic care only. Life-saving resources were reserved exclusively for Allied forces. Whitmore walked through the wards, the canvas flapping around him, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and suffering. He saw British soldiers, young men with treatable infections, waiting, hoping for the next penicillin shipment. Then he looked at the 40 Japanese women. They huddled together, their eyes wide with a terror born of propaganda that painted the British as brutal, merciless captors. They expected execution, or worse. The dying woman, her breath shallow, was a stark symbol of the choice before him. The Japanese prisoners remained silent, trained to expect torture, to reveal nothing. Whitmore knew this choice would define not just this moment, but the entire philosophy of British medical ethics under fire, a decision that would echo far beyond the muddy confines of this jungle hospital. The decision, when it came, sent a ripple of shock through the exhausted staff. Captain Whitmore, his voice calm but resolute, declared his intent. "We will treat all prisoners with the same standard of care as our own soldiers. The penicillin will be used on the dying woman." His justification, delivered with a quiet conviction, resonated with some but appalled others. "We're not fighting to become like them. We're fighting to prove we're better." It was a statement that flew in the face of military pragmatism and the ingrained animosity of war. The environment itself seemed to conspire against him. Monsoon rains continued to lash down, turning the hospital compound into a treacherous bog. Supplies, when they arrived, came by mule train, struggling through muddy tracks that swallowed men whole. The generator, a temperamental beast, failed regularly, plunging the surgical theater into darkness, forcing operations to continue by the flickering light of hurricane lamps. Staff, already pushed to their limits by 18-hour shifts treating casualties from ongoing operations, were at breaking point. The penicillin supply, a mere 47 vials, was enough for perhaps 30 treatments, a stark reminder of the impossible choices. Challenges multiplied with alarming speed. The senior medical officer, a man hardened by years of colonial service, threatened Whitmore with court-martial for misuse of military resources. Every vial used on an enemy, he argued, was a British soldier potentially left to die. Other doctors, while privately supporting Whitmore's moral stance, feared for their careers, caught between duty and conscience. The nursing staff was openly divided. Some, their faces tight with resentment, refused to treat the enemy, while others, led by the unflappable Sister Margaret Hughes from Cardiff, quietly followed Whitmore's lead, their professionalism overriding their personal feelings. The Japanese women, meanwhile, remained a silent, suspicious bloc. They expected the treatment to be a prelude to execution or, worse, experimentation, their indoctrination about British barbarity deeply ingrained. They initially refused food, convinced it was poisoned. They would not speak, even when interpreters were brought in. Whitmore, however, was methodical. He personally oversaw the treatment of the dying woman, administering the precious penicillin, despite her fever being so severe she was unconscious. He assigned Sister Hughes, his most capable nurse, to monitor her constantly, a silent vigil against the encroaching darkness. He then meticulously examined all 40 prisoners, documenting their injuries. Widespread malnutrition, tropical diseases unfamiliar to British doctors, untreated wounds, and the profound psychological trauma of capture. He established a treatment protocol, the same standard of care as British patients, no exceptions. His approach was one of unwavering patience. He ensured the Japanese women saw British soldiers receiving identical treatment in adjacent wards. He shared his own meager rations to prove the food wasn't poisoned. He worked alongside them without guards, a silent demonstration of trust. After 36 harrowing hours, the dying woman's fever finally broke. She would survive, but the real test was just beginning. Word had spread through command that Whitmore was coddling the enemy, and a formal investigation was ordered. The true transformation began when the recovered woman, Nurse Yamamoto Keiko, finally spoke. Her voice, weak but clear through the interpreter, held a profound bewilderment. She asked why she hadn't been allowed to die, why the British had wasted precious medicine on an enemy. Whitmore's response, translated carefully, was simple yet profound. Because you're a nurse, you've saved lives. That matters more than which flag you serve. This answer utterly perplexed the Japanese prisoners. Their military indoctrination had been absolute. Enemies showed no mercy. Capture meant torture and death, and the only honorable path was death in service to the emperor. The British approach, treating them as human beings deserving medical care regardless of nationality, contradicted everything they had been taught. It created a profound cognitive dissonance, a crack in their rigid worldview that slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to break down their resistance. They had expected brutality, not compassion. The operational impact of Whitmore's decision soon became visible. Yamamoto, her initial shock giving way to a quiet resolve, began assisting in the hospital. Her nursing training, though from a different system, was invaluable. She helped with the other prisoners, her presence a calming influence. More critically, she began to explain Japanese medical practices, helping the British doctors diagnose tropical diseases they hadn't encountered before. Slowly, tentatively, other prisoners began to cooperate. They provided intelligence about Japanese medical facilities still operating in the jungle, locations of wounded Japanese soldiers, and crucial information about disease outbreaks in Japanese camps. The intelligence windfall was extraordinary. Information gleaned from the prisoners led directly to the rescue of over 200 Allied POWs from a camp the British didn't even know existed. Medical intelligence about potential Japanese biological warfare research helped prevent a possible epidemic among Allied forces. The prisoners' cooperation provided tactical intelligence that saved countless British lives in subsequent operations. Whitmore's misuse of resources was now yielding tangible, strategic benefits. Yet the institutional conflict reached its crisis point. The formal investigation concluded that Whitmore had indeed violated protocol by prioritizing enemy treatment. He faced a potential court-martial, his career hanging by a thread. But the intelligence windfall, coupled with the immense propaganda value, BBC broadcasts highlighting British humanity in stark contrast to Japanese brutality, created significant political pressure. Churchill's office, recognizing the strategic implications, intervened. The treatment of these prisoners, it was argued, demonstrated core British values, proved moral superiority, and served a vital strategic purpose by encouraging Japanese surrender. The doctrinal shift began. Whitmore's approach, once a radical act of individual conscience, became official policy. Medical treatment of prisoners was standardized at the same level as British forces. This policy spread rapidly through Southeast Asia Command, then became a foundational principle in post-war discussions for the revised Geneva Conventions. What had started as one doctor's moral choice in a muddy field hospital was transforming institutional doctrine. The chapter ended with Yamamoto, her face now reflecting a quiet dignity, asking to continue working as a nurse under British supervision, treating both British soldiers and Japanese prisoners. Her request was approved. The enemy nurse had become an integral part of the British medical team. 3 months later, the war in the Pacific ended with Japan's surrender. All 40 women prisoners, against all odds and expectations, had survived. A 100% survival rate that stood in stark contrast to the horrific mortality rates of POWs elsewhere in the Pacific theater. Yamamoto and 5 other Japanese nurses had worked tirelessly alongside the British medical staff, their hands saving lives on both sides of the former conflict. The immediate aftermath revealed the profound impact of Whitmore's operation. 23 of the 40 women, their initial fear replaced by a quiet resolve, chose to testify at war crimes trials. Their accounts provided crucial, irrefutable evidence about Japanese military medical experiments and the brutal treatment of Allied POWs. Their testimony, credible precisely because they had no reason to aid their former captors, led to the convictions of numerous war criminals and helped establish vital precedents for medical ethics in warfare. The long-term consequences of Whitmore's actions transformed military medical doctrine globally. His approach became a seminal case study in military medical schools worldwide. The principle that medical ethics must transcend national allegiance, that humanity must prevail even in the crucible of war, became foundational to modern military medicine. The Geneva Conventions, revised extensively after the war, incorporated language directly influenced by the Burma Field Hospital precedent, mandating that prisoners must receive medical care equivalent to that provided to the captor's own forces. The personal stories, however, truly revealed the human dimension of this extraordinary episode. Yamamoto Keiko remained in Burma after the war, working with British medical missions to treat civilian populations devastated by years of conflict. She eventually moved to London in 1952, finding work at St. Thomas's Hospital, and proudly became a British citizen in 1960. She maintained a correspondence with Captain Whitmore until his death in 1978, always referring to him as the doctor who taught me that humanity matters more than nationality. Whitmore himself returned to Manchester, resuming his civilian medical practice. He rarely, if ever, publicly discussed the Burma incident, his quiet humility characteristic of his generation. He was awarded the George Cross in 1947, the citation reading for conspicuous gallantry in upholding the highest traditions of British medical service under circumstances of extreme difficulty. He trained a generation of doctors, always emphasizing that medical ethics could not be situational. They must hold even when inconvenient, even when costly, even when facing the enemy. The fates of the other prisoners varied. Some returned to Japan, struggling with the shame of survival and cooperation. Others, like Yamamoto, built new lives in foreign lands. Several became vocal advocates for peace and reconciliation. One, inspired by her experience, became a professor of medical ethics in Tokyo, teaching about the British doctor who proved that enemies could indeed show mercy. Historical recognition came slowly. The story remained largely classified until 1972, when documents were declassified. Historians researching post-war medical ethics stumbled upon the Burma Field Hospital case. Academic papers meticulously analyzed the decision's strategic impact, the invaluable intelligence gained, the potent propaganda value, the countless lives saved. Military historians noted a measurable increase in Japanese surrender rates in sectors where the British humane treatment of prisoners became known. The enduring lessons were clear. Whitmore proved that maintaining ethical standards under pressure wasn't weakness, but strength. Treating enemies with humanity didn't betray one's own side. It demonstrated precisely what one was fighting for. Individual moral courage could, against all odds, transform institutional doctrine. The choice to save one enemy's life could ripple forward through decades, influencing international law and saving countless future lives. In 1995, on the 50th anniversary of VJ Day, the surviving prisoners and British medical staff reunited in London. Yamamoto, now 72, stood beside Whitmore's daughter, reading his diary entry from that night in 1945. Ordered to let her die quietly. But we're British. We don't let people die quietly when we can save them. That's not who we are. That's not why we're fighting this war. If we become like our enemies to defeat them, we've already lost what matters most. The operation proved something fundamental. That ordinary people facing impossible choices can demonstrate extraordinary humanity. A nation's character is revealed not in how it treats friends, but in how it treats enemies. Innovation born from moral conviction can change history. The British spirit, stubborn, principled, refusing to compromise core values even under extreme pressure, can transform not just battles, but the very rules of warfare itself. This incredible tale of moral courage and medical innovation truly showcases the best of British spirit. If you found this historical narrative compelling, do subscribe to our channel for more untold stories from the past. Let us know in the comments below. How do you think individual choices can transform history, especially in the face of impossible circumstances? Your thoughts are always welcome.